Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone? Good? Better after meditation? Yeah. I would like to talk about meditation for a moment. The title of this talk, or the theme of this talk today, is Love, Compassion, and Chaos. And of course, the chaos refers to what's going on outside of us, in our outer world, on our planet, in our country. What it feels like for us to live in the days we're in now. So let's start with meditation. So I think everyone in this room, all of us, could feel in the meditation a certain level of relaxing. Right? There was a certain quiet that came in, not just auditory quiet, but kind of a stillness that we could feel arising from the inside. Okay. The point of meditation, and there's a lot of different meditation techniques, and meditation is emphasized so much on the Buddhist path. But one of the things that I think is most important about meditation is that we are allowing ourselves to become still so that our innate Buddha nature can arise. And our innate Buddha nature is love itself, is compassion. What starts to happen in meditation once we meditate, I'm sure everybody in this room has been meditating before as a practitioner. So what gets revealed to us in meditation is that everything that's going on outside of us is coming through us as stimulus, right, or stimuli. We have 5 senses, and through those 5 senses, we negotiate in the world. We live our lives through the information coming in, through our senses, and then our mind processes all this stimulus coming in and tells us this is what's going on. And that's how we interpret the world. The way the chaos starts is that each of us have a unique way of interpreting the world. We don't all interpret it in the same way. Everyone's mind, all of us, we have what we call in Buddhism as a personal mind, an individualized mind. And that mind that we each have is very affected, impacted, what we call conditioned. So in Tibetan Buddhist view, it's not only conditioned from this lifetime, but it's also conditioned from past lifetimes. So when we come into this lifetime as a human, there's already certain remnants from past lives that are going to have us lean in certain ways. And on top of that is our education system, our family, our country, the town we live in, all these factors. And the conditioning happens through all the factors where we want to feel loved, and so we tend to want to agree with the conditioning that's put upon us, right? We want to be loved by our parents. We want to please our parents. We want to please our teachers, our peers, our village, our town. It's very important for us as human species to be social, to be connected. So we tend to absorb whatever the belief systems are around us. And then we go through life with these belief systems. And where the disharmony comes in is that everybody's conditioned a little bit differently with different belief systems. So then you have 8 billion people on the planet, and every single one of the 8 billion of us have a different view, a different way of interpreting the world, a different set of belief systems. And those belief systems create in each of us opinions. So depending on what we believe in, depending on what we think is going to make us happy, what we pursue, we determine what we like and what we don't like, and then we push away the things we don't like, and we gravitate towards the things we like. And the result of this kind of individualized, conditioned mind directing us towards things we want, things we don't want, is the human condition. And in Buddhism, what we're trying to do is clear away what we call obscurations. And what are obscurations? Obscurations are all the conditioning that we have been basically what we call afflicted with. Our conditioning is more thought of as afflictions in Buddhism, because our conditioning and our belief systems, from a Buddhist view, are illusory. They're not real. How we see the world, the stimulus coming in, is actually distorted by our belief systems. Sometimes we hear people say, or that quote, we see things the way we want to, or we see things as the way we are. That's very much part of Buddhist nature of mind teachings. We don't see things as they really are. We see things as the way we either want them to be, or the way we're trying to get them to be, so that we as an individual can be happy. And that's a beautiful aspect of every single one of us. In Buddhism, we believe every sentient being, not only humans, insects, animals, beings that we can't see, formless beings, every sentient being wants the same thing: to be happy, to feel love, to know that we are loved. One of the reasons why, again, in Buddhist view, we feel there's so much disharmony in the world right now is we depend on our individual mind for telling us who we are and what's going on out in the world. And that's not an accurate representation of who we are. A more accurate representation is that we are each love itself, compassion itself, light itself. We are not these bodies. We're not these forms. We're not our thoughts. We have thoughts. And we often, many of us, relate to our thoughts in a very direct experiential way. We don't have a lot of space from our thoughts. A thought comes up about what we like or don't like or want, and we immediately respond or react from that thought. One of the things we do in Buddhism, which I'm sure is, Western Buddhism, American Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, all forms of Buddhism, I think this happens very early on in our practice, is that we start to inquire, we start to look inwardly at these thoughts that are arising. And one of the first things we want to ask is, this thought that's arising, where is it coming from? Is it personal to me? Is it about my personal agenda? Is it telling me something that the mind thinks I want to hear because I am pursuing a certain way of life that's going to be comfortable, that there's going to be contentment in? And what we find is when we inquire as thoughts arise and we look at those thoughts, that most, if not all, of the thoughts that are arising have a level of untruth or misconception or conditioning to them. One of the practices in Buddhism is to disregard the personal mind entirely, which sounds very drastic, right? To just not pay attention to any of our thoughts anymore. But in Buddhist view, no longer being driven by the personal mind is a level of awakening. And in Buddhism and in other traditions as well, all other traditions really, what we're trying to attain is a level of awakening. Right? To get out of the chaos of here's the world, here's what's coming in as a stimulus, here's how I process it, here's what I believe, and here's how I deal with it all. In Buddhism, awakening is transcending all of it. In Buddhism, the understanding is there's something that happens when we can transcend the personal mind with all of its criticisms and reproach and telling us what's wrong and how to fix it. And what happens when we transcend all of that is that Buddha nature arises and we discover who we really are. And that's a big statement. You know, we hear it in a lot of traditions, we hear it in New Age philosophy, we hear it in existential philosophy. Who are we? Who are we when we drop all of the things that are actually impermanent? So we're asking in Buddhism is, what is not impermanent? Right? Everything in our life comes and goes. You know, people, houses, cars, our own bodies. And I think it's very obvious that one of the things we cling to most as humans is this body. If there's anything we can call ours, it would be this. Right? Nobody else is in here. It's just us. So that's where we start. The spiritual journey, the Buddhist journey, is an inward journey. This is what I consider me. Right? Everything out there is something else, but this is what I consider me. So let's look inwardly at who is this person I call me. Most of us on the planet, what we are calling me is our identification with things outside of ourselves or things that are impermanent. So we identify with our thoughts, we identify with our belief systems. We actually are confused into thinking that our belief systems are who we actually are. Right? I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, that's who I am. And then there's all kinds of labels, and labels on top of labels on top of labels. And that's how we distinguish from each other to a large extent. That's how the mind is processing. But in Buddhism, what we're saying is we want to go beyond all of that. Because again, all of these things are illusory. At a certain point, not only will everything leave us, but this body itself leaves us. And all the identifications that we have with this world leave us. But what's left, what doesn't leave us, this Buddha nature, this aspect of ourselves that we can call wisdom, joy, unconditional love, those are the things that on the spiritual path we want to become identified with while we are in a body. Right? That is what we would call awakening. We actually move beyond the personal mind, and we discover that who we are is much vaster, much more expanded, much more connected to everything we perceive that's seemingly outside of ourselves. There's a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's a book that lamas and teachers in the Buddhist tradition use when somebody is transitioning, somebody's dying, they're leaving their body. A lot of times lamas will come, sangha will come, and they will read this book to the person that's dying or the person who has just died. And in the earliest translation of it, many of the paragraphs, because you're speaking to the person that has either died or is in the process of dying, many of the paragraphs start with, "O nobly born." What they're referring to is the fact that we are, in a certain kind of view, of noble descent. We are noble beings. We are loved. We are loving. And speaking in that way, calling the noble part of us, the Buddha nature, forth as we're transitioning, helps us in our transitioning to awaken. In Buddhism, we say that there's a greater possibility of awakening at the point of transition, especially if we're practitioners. And so that's what we're also trying to do as practitioners in the body when we're healthy, when we're alive, is connect with this aspect of ourselves which we call noble, which is the glue that holds the universe together. We are a part of that. When we connect with our own Buddha nature, what we start to feel is a boundless joy. And the unconditional love that I've mentioned is not a love that we can identify with our minds. It's actually a love that's a presence that we abide in. At first, when it first starts arising, we feel it as kind of this feeling or this state of being. Eventually, as we move along the path, we experience it as our very selves. And then as we're moving along this kind of, or traversing this continuum, these levels of awakening, more and more we experience ourselves as connected to everything, as not only being loved, but having such a profound capacity to hold love that we cannot help but love everybody else. And as we awaken more and more, we identify with our own Buddha nature more than our personal self, and we begin to see Buddha nature in everyone else. And in a nutshell, I'm going through a lot of material in a very succinct way because time limits. But one of the points I think is so important about this theme of Buddha nature, arising Buddha nature, identifying with Buddha nature, is that this is what allows us to exit samsara. And samsara is, simple term would be the world of suffering. Right? We're all aware of the fact that many of us, if not all of us, are suffering in some extent. And discovering our own Buddha nature exits us out of suffering. We still see suffering in others. We're still very aware. Once we are connected with our own Buddha nature, we may not feel like we're suffering, but we're very aware we're in the world, and mostly everyone else is suffering. And so then, because of the great love that has arisen and has been cultivated, this compassion, we naturally just want to extend our joy and our love to others. And this entire process, in Buddhist view, is what will overcome the chaos in our world. It's not so much going out with our personal view and trying to fix the world, although that's a beautiful thing. But the true awakening is the inward journey, discovering who we are eternally, not just in this one lifetime, and then sharing that with others through compassion, through joy. There's so much about the Buddhist path that is beautiful. Meditation is just one way to kind of start getting us connected to this arising stillness, this arising Buddha nature. But there are many, many teachings and trainings and aspects and levels of Buddhism where we move into what we call, we're not going to talk about the Bhumis really too much, but there is something called Bhumi 1, which is this first state of awakening, and it's called the joyous one. And when we move into the first Bhumi, that first state of awakening, we have overcome our sorrow and are now in joy. And that's how we will move through our life from then on. I think we're pretty close to needing to, yeah. Okay, so I'll stop there. I want to thank Victor and thank you all for listening. And it's just really an honor for us to come to Kansas City. We love it here. We've really been having a great time. So good luck on the path.